Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. We're taking a quick look here at BakeryToken, and it's going to be a good one here, folks, because obviously, as you I likely already know, it's making higher highs and it's significantly increased in price over the past few trading days. So I'm excited to bring this back to you here so we can find a good entry point and just essentially help you understand what's going on with the technical data. This is only a technical analysis. There's no fundamentals here. If you'd like to comment down below and kind of give us some insight on what's going on with the fundamentals, absolutely welcome. Please feel free to do so. Also, just note that I'm not a financial advisor. I am here for educational purposes only, and I recommend you always do your own research. Furthermore, there is a link in the description below for $25 in Bitcoin from Voyager, as well as a link to our Telegram community so you can stay engaged and up to date with everything technical analysis. All right, so that's in the description below as well. So hopefully we'll see you in the chats later on, but for now, let's go ahead and get right to the analysis. All right, folks, let's go ahead and take a look at Bake. Now, just before we do, I'd like to preface in the fact that I commonly like to look at Bitcoin and Ethereum before we jump into that, just to kind of get perspective on the market, because obviously everything that does well in the market is based on Bitcoin's success, and furthermore, a lot of them are also on the Ethereum network. So I'd just like to cover all the bases so we can get a quick baseline on what's going on there. So let's take a look at that first. So, starting with Bitcoin here. An interesting couple of days, which is awesome. So if we take a look here, this was our major support level, but previous resistance. So what's nice about this is you can see that the moving average, the 50-day moving average, bounced off 5 times. So it rejected there and then came back up. And then just to quickly note as well, this previous support level of 53,000 was tested and held, and it shot right past the 100-day moving average. And initially, it held up on the actual 200-day moving average. It was tested. That's the resistance level we had, about 57,000, and then it also jumped up past that, and it might be coming back down to test that again. Okay. So really cool price movement here from Bitcoin, definitely helping everything else out in the overall sense of things. Let's look at Ethereum next. Still making higher highs, as we can see. And what's cool to note is that it was impacted by Bitcoin. So you see, the first dip here was Bitcoin, and then it ramped back up. Another second Bitcoin dip, and then the very last Bitcoin dip. And the reason why I say that is cool is because the price continues to increase, contrary to what Bitcoin is doing. And if you don't already know, when Bitcoin suffers and it does poorly, then people jump ship and go over to Ethereum, which is why the price goes up when Bitcoin is doing poorly. Minus the strong dips, of course, that you see there. All in all, that is essentially how that works. And just note here, the moving averages are all working pretty much as support levels at this point, but we won't know much until it continues on a little further. Again, we're not here to analyze this, but that is just generally the concept of how Ethereum is working right now. So, on to Bake, the reason why we're here. Now let's take a look at the one-day chart first, just to quickly note what's going on here. And as you can see, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days have been pretty solid, minus the sell-off from yesterday. That was a bit of a consolidation phase. We'll look at that soon. But for right now, as you can see, it may just consider making another higher high. So $7.43 appears to be the highest point. And last time I reviewed this, it was somewhere in the range of like $4.25, $4.30 I think it was. So it's done awesome. So good for Bake, and excuse me, good for whomever else is in this currency right now and able to essentially make a profit, because it would have been nice to get down around the $1.20 range, right? That being said, let's go ahead and take a look now. At first, we want to always identify RSI and MACD on the one-day chart, just to clearly get perspective on the overall market sentiment. And big surprise, right? It's completely bullish. So RSI is maxed out almost at about 85. That's usually as high as it typically will go. Sometimes 90, but that is essentially a pretty high RSI. So commonly when you see something like that on the one-day chart, it's not super significant. The 4-hour chart, I think it tells us more. But generally speaking right now, I would be cautious with your entry. We'll take a look and see if there's any support and resistance levels we want to pay attention to. But when the price goes up this fast, this early, I always like to exercise caution and just make sure you understand that it's unless you know some really strong fundamental information, that supports the fact that it keeps increasing the way it is, based on the technical data alone, sometimes it can be very, it's not ideal to jump in this scenario, if that makes sense. If nothing else, wait for it to calm down. Like yesterday, for example, that consolidation period would have been probably a good time to invest. Easier said than done, of course, because it's after the fact that the price went up. It could have went down too, but just generally that's what I'm trying to get at, is the fact that you want to be careful when you see RSI this high and the MACD shooting straight upwards. It's exciting, but don't buy into the hype. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at the 4-hour chart next. See if we can identify anything better. I like this a lot better because of the fact that we do have this consolidation channel, and it eventually broke out here recently. But as you can see, RSI was extremely overextended over those past few days, and at this point right now it's still a little high in the 70 range. So me personally, I wouldn't consider taking entry in this climate, because even though it is making higher highs, I think it's going to peak out eventually soon and possibly come back down. So just be mindful of that. Be aware that these indicators are extremely bullish, which tells me that there might likely be a reversal soon. Another thing to note too is that when it maxed out right here at about $5.90, RSI was at its all-time high of 95. Okay, so just pay attention to the RSI on the 4-hour chart and see if it continues to trend upwards, and it'll eventually plateau and want to come back down. Just again, something to be mindful of. Also bear in mind the moving averages have no effect right now. Not going to matter for a little while until the price calms down a little bit more. So again, just something to understand going into your, if you're averaging up or averaging down, whatever the case is, just be mindful of how the overall sentiment is. This tells me that it may not be advantageous to consider taking entry. But we'll take a look at the 15-minute chart and the 1-minute chart too to kind of identify and see if that, everything looks different there. And big surprise, look at that, it reached its high of what, $7.44 approximately, and now it's starting to sell off and come back down and correct itself. Another thing to note here on the 15-minute chart, I always try to advise this, or just at least make sure you're aware of it, because it is a good indicator. It helps you understand a lot, which is why I like the 15-minute chart the most. The RSI on the 15-minute chart, anytime it comes up over 70, it's almost always an indication of a sell signal. So pay attention to this, because if you look here, right, it creeped up over, right around 75, still making higher highs. It hit its highest point at $5.72, and coincidentally, the RSI was close to 80, right? So I would just say that, if you're interested in taking profits and you're like, considering skimming or, short-term day trading, or even just short-term swing trading, pay attention to the RSI on the 15-minute chart and see when it gets over 70. Even though if it's making higher highs, it will consistently keep going, which it did recently, it'll eventually cap out and come back down. And for the most part, when you see an RSI over 70 on the 15-minute chart, it does kind of signal a reversal. It may not be super strong. This is a very small reversal, but it was still an opportunity to maybe be able to take some profit and maybe skim a little bit off the top, 10 or 20%, which I usually recommend. So that is that. Now moving forward, I'm looking at the RSI right now as well, even though it's close to about 70, which is tolerable. You can see that it hit 86 and came crashing down, so to speak. Again, not a major crash, that's like 50 cents, but on the same accord, in the big picture, that's probably a large percent of the total gain, right? Like, what is that? That's almost a little over 12%, somewhere in that range. So, again, there's money to be made when you hit that. Just bear in mind when the RSI is over 70, I would advise paying close attention to the price action and seeing if you can find an opportunity to be able to take some profits while you still can. Other than that, really not much else to disseminate here. We've got what the MACD is. Looks like it's starting to plateau and it's leveling out. Again, not a lot of significance on the MACD and the 15-minute chart. I think the 4-hour chart is probably the only MACD I really care about. But it does tell us a little bit about the overall momentum, and it does look like it's shifting from bullish to bearish. Again, it's too early to note. Moving on to the 1-minute chart. Let's take a look here. And as you can see, the price action was so severe, the volume weighted average price had to jump up to catch up. But if you take a look at the difference, that's probably a pretty significant percent. There you go, 32% between the VWAP and the price action at that time. So I always like to recommend that you look at the difference between the volume weighted average price and the current price action. If that variance is significant like you see here, even though yes it's making higher highs, it's a signal that there will be a reversal soon. Okay. Now the way that the View app works on TradingView, I don't particularly love it because it doesn't have a high or a low range. So that's unfortunate. We can't truly see the peak, but if you were to see one, there would normally be a range right up here that's kind of holding the price down a little bit. So that being said, now that the View app is caught up, it is currently being tested. So we'll see how this works. And just in case you guys aren't familiar, if you're new to the channel, the volume weighted average price is nice because it takes a 24-hour snapshot essentially of all the volume and the price action and makes an average price. So that's the average price based on the amount of volume to let us know kind of what the averages are. So it's really helpful in indicating a strong support and resistance level that is consistent with the price. So instead of creating a bunch of new support and resistance levels, that is essentially a moving average support level and resistance level. Okay, so that's why I put a lot of weight into it. Now bear in mind the 1 minute chart is a different scenario. It is helpful, of course. The View app is actually the most accurate on the 1 minute chart. However, you don't get firm confirmation, so I prefer to use a 15-minute chart to get, like, just say a 15-minute hypothetical green bar or red bar to know what the overall sentiment is in that time frame. So if you kind of take the average of this all right here, that's probably about a 15-minute green bar, but we're going to see a 15-minute red bar here likely forming. So just something to note when you're taking entry there. Also the moving averages, I prefer to use maybe a 10 or a 20 moving average on the 1 minute chart, whereas the 50 and the 100 aren't exactly precise. So just bear in mind you may not want to use these moving averages on the 1 minute chart, but they are helpful in the 15 and the 4 hour in my opinion. So let's talk about an entry point. Just kind of looking at the information here, what might be ideal, and to probably do the best, kind of find the best options here, because when the price action is so severe here, you really can't find good support and resistance levels unless you wait. So if you don't want to wait and you're kind of impatient, we'll take the lowest point here for the Fibonacci retracement tool, and we'll see approximately what that looks like. So as you can kind of see, we've got a support level right here and of course resistance there, but the new resistance level should be right around this level. So it could be interesting to see. There's likely the price will probably reject roughly right around here and maybe come back down. But to me, honestly, just to be straightforward with you all, right now I don't recommend taking entry. Again, I'm kind of a conservative trader, so if I were to recommend anything, it's always just to wait for confirmation. In this scenario, we don't have enough data to find that confirmation yet, in my opinion. So I'd personally wait a little bit longer to find out what's going to happen with the price and to see where new support and resistance levels are established. And maybe just use this chart to kind of get a general baseline of what would be, maybe recommended, because it does appear that this is starting to form as a strong support level. So we'll just go ahead and mark that. Another thing to note too is if you're planning to take entry, I always recommend this because the Fibonacci retracement tool is awesome, but it's kind of an indication of what the industry leaders or the industry standards are doing. So when you see these resistance and support levels, it's important to be mindful of what they actually mean, because these are the resistance and support levels that are established essentially by those who control the overall price, right? Because this price is essentially established from large industry leaders, not the little guys like us that are putting small amounts in and out. They're doing large transactions and they're driving the price up or down, and they usually drive it based on these support and resistance levels. So I always recommend just make sure that if you were to consider taking entry, take entry a little bit higher right here instead of right on the line, or perhaps a little bit lower if you're doing the inverse, right? So you want to just be a little less greedy than the other person. That's kind of my rule, because they'll likely go right up to that resistance level. So say for example you took entry right here at $6.58, right in this line that I created, and your goal is to get up to this resistance level. Would be recommended not go right to that level because it'll probably get rejected and come back down. So I recommend going right here maybe at $6.83 instead. See, a point that's just a little less greedy as the other, the industry standards, because, you know, again, if they're controlling the price, you got to kind of anticipate where they're going to be. And this retracement tool kind of helps us do that. It's not an exact science, but it does kind of give you a perspective on roughly what ranges they're working within. And knowing that and undercutting them gives you a significant advantage. And again, I only recommend using a tool like this in this scenario because of the fact that the price action is, you know, so severe right now. Because again, we can't just sit here and wait and try to find a support and resistance level. We kind of have to go on, you know, the traditional averages there. So that's just something to note. And deleting that, I would say, just generally speaking, right now, our temporary support level is right around $6.58. So we'll see roughly where that's going to go, because it's hard to say honestly at this point. So I guess my takeaway here is just to be very careful, wait for confirmation. We need more time for the price to level out to get that confirmation. And if you are insisting on taking entry, make sure you use the Fibonacci retracement tool, and always remember to start at the bottom, essentially wherever the most recent retracement was. In other words, this is a retracement when the price hits its peak and comes down. Be sure to put your tool right at the lowest point after retracement and go to the very highest point, and it'll tell you roughly what those percents are. So we were able to get a support level from that, so it's helpful to note, but there's likely a good chance that it'll come down, test this support level, it might reject and come back up, or it might break and stay below. But again, just be careful, be patient, and don't take entry without the proper confirmation. And to me, we're a few hours away from confirmation, if that makes sense. Don't buy into the hype. Be careful. Be safe. and let me know down below in the comments what you decided to do. It'd be interesting to find out. And obviously, join our Telegram community and jump in the conversation. And feel free to message myself in the community. But I do thank you very much for joining me here today. We'll see you again soon. I'll probably keep a closer eye on Bake moving forward, just so we're all in the know and we understand a little bit more about what to do moving forward. Thank you very much again. Hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll see you.